But dogs and cats are the most recognisable of the witches' familiars in Western iconography. So where would Halloween be without the witch and her black cat? In a list that also includes horses, ravens, hares, toads, wasps, rats, and even pigs. While dogs and cats are powerful and compelling creatures in ancient mythology and religions, with figures such as Anubis, Bast or Bastet, Cerberus, Sirius, Gamma, Shishi, Bakanenko, and Mikachi, amongst others, they take a more subservient, yet no less significant role as a familiar. Cats and dogs also have a significant duality in horror, being both victims and perpetrators, signals of evil and a tool to ward off or detect evil, and often the ability to move beyond or between realities. Associated with the spirit realm, magic, sexuality, and desire, they can represent both good and evil forces, allowing access into forbidden or hidden territories. And just a note for this, I'll pretty much be talking about British and Irish folklore just to kind of keep it narrowed down, and looking at how it might be used in but more relevant today. Familiars are supernatural entities that aid magical practitioners. Bonded to their chosen human, they offer guardianship, guidance, and knowledge, as well as acting as a proxy or servant. They're not simply companions or pets, they can actually be an extension of the self. They can be malevolent or benevolent, depending on the desires of their human, and often take the form of animals, although that's not actually always the case, so that's how you get doubles and phantasms and the fetch in folklore as well. So while children's stories feature both good and bad familiars, characters in fairy tales and Disney who are perceived as evil or are evil will usually have a recognisable familiar, such as a black cat, a rat, or a raven. So we're often brought up with the ideas that these creatures are inherently trustworthy, and of course they're usually black as well. Superpowers bestowed by familiars can include strength, flight, prophecy, shape-shifting, wisdom, healing, or astral travel. Familiars, including dogs, cats, and ravens, which I can't talk about here because they haven't got enough time, are often psychopomps, creatures who guide deceased souls through or to the afterlife. Associated with transgressive states, they're able to navigate the in-between paradoxical worlds of dying and pregnancy, binding different realities together and providing an instinctive understanding of the liminal. There's a prevalence for the familiars to be black in colour, so there doesn't actually appear to be a reason that they are black beyond black is seen as a negative colour. It's associated with solemnity and mourning and death. So apart from that, so with black cats are obviously the preferred choice of most fictional witches, and stories of black dogs roaming the countryside along unwary travellers. As a non-colour that absorbs light, black is linked in Western symbology with darkness, evil, and oppression, an ally of the monsters that it disguises. Susan McHugh writes of how dogs have been utilised as a way of negatively describing members of other cultures, particularly noting historian David Gordon's White work, which establishes a pattern across the world of using dogs or hybrid dogs to represent outsiders. Quote, usually depicted with dog heads or faces, such people often display other dog-like traits, such as barking and tails. They exhibit more recognisably human behaviours, such as cannibalism and sodomy, and qualities, such as black skin and excessive body hair, only when these aspects represent the obverse of the ideals of the culture defining them as monsters. Dehumanised by their dog-like ways, dog men are perhaps most threatening in ways in which they prove all too human. Similarly, Joan Donaire suggests that the negative association between women and animals works in both directions. So while, quote, symbolically associating women with animal assists in their oppression, end quote, the animals become linked with negative, supposedly feminine traits, such as frivolity. So I'm thinking of Shauna's talk from yesterday, where female power comes at with the cost of dehumanization. Applying the same framework to witches and their familiars, they both are associated with the two extremes of, so you have domestic, low, consumed and ugly. They're thinking of animals considered pests or livestock. And at the other end, you have wild, uncontrollable, sexual, and creatures with power over death and life. So whether as a denigration or an empowerment, Those who have been marginalised, disenfranchised, or othered by Western patriarchal structures find allies in animals. Sorry for the not very good picture of Black Phillip there. Many familiars are anthropomorphized, either by showing human characteristics such as speech or walking on two legs if they are four-legged creatures, or by acting as a proxy for their human, collapsing the conceptual order between human and animal as well as reality and magic. This collapse also allows for the animal to be brought under human concepts of ethical frameworks. Well, according to Emmanuel Levina and Matthew Calarco, an animal is considered beyond ethics. The anthropomorphism of the familiar suggests that they have the capacity for ethical or unethical agency. This in turn allows the familiar to indulge in behaviours that further others them, with, quote, the traditional qualities of prototypical antagonistic characters such as evil intent, lust for personal vengeance, and the ability to uphold or break the unwritten rules of a fair fight. So reminded here of Scoville and his notes on the skewed belief systems and morality that you find in folklore. However, the threat of the familiar is an ability to be an agent rather than an aggressor. In animal horror or eco-horror, the animal is usually, but not always, the object of the attack. So the threat of them is their ability to attack, maim, kill, or worst of all, eat the human victim. Transforming the human from consumer to consumed is a fundamental fear in horror, challenging the position of powerful apex predator with dominion over all other life. The familiar, on the other hand, is deeply invested in their chosen person, whether that is as an ally or an enemy. Whereas in Revenge of Nature texts, the animal will use the landscape to their advantage or be used as a tool in the environment's arsenal. The familiar will work with and through the environment and its chosen people. In folklore, there is a real or mystical connection between animals and their home or people, while in mainstream animal horror, the threat is more visceral. The black dog may look fearsome, but it's what it represents that creates that fear. They are gateways and symbols, whereas in other more conventional horror dogs such as Cujo will just eat you. So you have omens versus teeth. Speaking of dogs, the phantom dogs of British folklore are traditionally found in liminal spaces, ley lines, crossroads, gates and bridges, as well as near water. When benevolent, they often accompany travellers on their journeys as a companion or guide, even protecting their charges from robbers and suspicious-looking men. When aggressive, they can attack, cause accidents, or even explode, although it should be noted that in most cases, the dog only does so when threatened. Most frequent sightings of otherworldly dogs in England are from East Anglia, namely Lincolnshire and Norfolk, with its infamous Black Shuck. Typical accounts speak of a huge, fiery-eyed, shaggy black dog as big as a calf, with an eerie howl that appears shortly before death. The black dogs that stalk the liminal worlds of British and Irish folklore are, quote, unfeasibly large dogs, darker than the night sky, with eyes the size of saucers and glowing red, end quote. The image of an intimidating black hound that signifies death is a potent one, and one that has prevailed throughout mythology and folklore, such as the immense dog, evidently a fierce brute, that Dracula briefly masquerades as, to the fiery-eyed titular hound of the Hound of the Baskervilles. The archetypal black dog is able to transgress all worlds, walking the line between reality and the supernatural, life and death. Dogs are ideal conduits for these themes, with Albie Stone noting that they, quote, exhibit a halfway state between domestic and the feral. The dog's existence in the in-between liminal place allows it to access other worlds and sense the inhabitants of those realms. The dog is perfectly suited to this role. It is the quintessential domestic animal, the tamed carnivore that stands midway between beast and human, the wild and civilized. As well as a propensity for appearing on thresholds, two of the most prevalent themes associated with black dogs are the transgressive states of death and travel. Dogs have a connection with death in many cultures, able to see or sense spirits, warn or prevent death, or stand vigil over the dead, such as Greyfriars Bobby, Hachiko, and the Black Dog of Newgate Prison in 1612 that accompanied prisoners to the gallows or tortured the condemned. It's the dog's position as a shadowy in-between creature that endures and arguably contributes to the canine's popularity as a familiar in folklore, as well as both companion and aggressor in horror. So moving on to cats. The religious persecution of cats has a long history. For example, black cats were common in the households of ancient Egypt and considered lucky through their association with Bast or Bastet. However, Roman Emperor Theodosius I enforced a strict Christian doctrine that made so-called pagan practices illegal, including the worship of idols or spirits. The black cat or its image therefore quickly became associated with pagan beliefs. Around 1233, Pope Gregory IX declared that black cats were demonic and carried satanic forces. Women and cats were sometimes burned together as witch and familiar, while notes of a feline familiar appear in one of the first witch trials in 1566. Like dogs, cats can be guides between realities, as well as signals to both character and audience that something is not right with the world, a tradition that continues in mainstream horror texts. The cat from Coraline and Salem from The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina protect their chosen humans, attempting to warn them of danger, as well as possessing the ability to move into different realities alongside them. The cat in The Grudge is a portent of danger, while the death of cats in Mike Flanagan's work, such as The Haunting of Hill House and Midnight Mass, is an early and formidable sign of the horror to come. In Stephen King's mythology, cats are able to detect vampires, and in Terry Pratchett's books, they sometimes eat them, while the resurrected church is returned not right in an unheeded warning for the main characters of Pet Sematary. A notorious modern example of cat folklore occurs in The Matrix, where Neo sees a black cat walk by, only to see an identical one walk past a moment later. Originally dismissing it as déjà vu, it's revealed to be a signal that the malevolent machines have altered something within the Matrix itself. And while The Matrix isn't a horror film, I suggest that it created a new folklore for the changing technologies of the time, from the traditional tropes of folklore with avatars replacing doppelgangers and technology replacing magic. Like dogs, mythological or folkloric cats have a guardianship role, caring for and even healing their chosen people. For example, it's considered lucky to have a cat on a ship, particularly black or polydactyl cats, as the extra digit supposedly assists in their balance on rough seas. Seafaring cats were thought to bring luck to those on board and protect ships from dangerous weather, while their behaviour could predict or control weather conditions. This possibly grew from the cat's ability to detect changes in pressure. That's common before a storm. Losing a cat overboard was incredibly unlucky and probably didn't do that much for the cat either. While there are many stories about unusual cat behaviour before a disaster, such as Emmy, the cat on the RMS Empress of Ireland, who jumped ship while in port and wouldn't return, and then the next day the ship went out and was struck by another ship in fog and sank. Myth, superstition and folklore still permeates the stories we tell today, and the animal familiar has come along with them. Black dog and giant black cat sightings are still reported in Britain, while many people see black cats as either good luck or bad luck. And we still use phrases like the hair of the dog for as a cure for a hangover, which is originally taken from swallowing a hair of a dog that had bitten you to help heal the bite. While the sinister black dog of depression, mentioned by 18th century writers and popularised by Winston Churchill, is still used as a symbol of mental health charities. And just as an aside, while I was writing this, I was thinking about how working dogs, such as guide dogs, medical alert dogs, security dogs, are still kind of used as familiars, and as an extension of the self, they are still guiding us and still keeping us safe. Familiars still appear in folklore, indie and mainstream horror, as well as science fiction and fantasy. So we have some examples here from literature, film, TV and video games. Transgressing time, medium, genre and geography, stories about familiars continue to charm, thrill and fascinate us. They endure as guides, protectors, doubles, psychopomps and vessels, but also as a reminder that humans are perhaps not so removed from nature and its implied wildness as some might like to believe. Thank you very much.